Chapter 1. A Saturday Morning. The Saturday morning sun, thin and golden as spun sugar, filtered through the large window of the third-floor apartment, illuminating a constellation of dust motes dancing in the air. For Leo Vance, this was the quietest hour, the one that felt most like his own. The scent of burnt sugar and melting butter filled their small kitchen, a weekly ritual that needed no words. "A perfect circle!" his 8-year-old daughter Maya announced from her stool at the counter, her chin resting on her palms. She watched with the focus of a scientist as Leo tilted the pan, coaxing the pancake batter into an orb of flawless geometry. "It's all in the wrist," Leo said, his voice a low rumble that was still laced with sleep. He flipped the pancake, a practiced flick that sent it spinning in the air before landing perfectly on its other side. Their life was a collection of these small, perfect moments, carefully constructed to fill the space a larger absence had left behind. The apartment, a cozy space in the heart of the Iron District, was more workshop than living room. Books on engineering and art were stacked on every available surface, competing for space with Maya's crayon drawings and half-finished Lego creations. On the mantel, a framed photo showed a woman with paint on her cheek and a smile that seemed to generate its own light. Alara. After breakfast, Leo cleaned while Maya cleared her homework from the kitchen table. Her current school project was an ambitious one, a memory box. It was a shoebox, painted a vibrant sky blue, that was meant to house a diorama of a day at the beach, the last one they had taken together as a family of 3. She had painstakingly sculpted tiny figures of the 3 of them from clay and crafted a sun from a yellow bottle cap. The artistic vision was all there, inherited directly from her mother. The mechanics, however, were another story. She held the box out to him, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Serious." "Dad," she said, her voice serious. Thoughtful. "How do I make the waves move?" Leo took the box, his fingers tracing the edge of the carefully painted cardboard ocean. He could see it in his mind instantly. A simple clockwork mechanism. A series of offset cams that would make the painted waves rise and fall in a gentle, rhythmic sequence. He knew the precise dimensions of the gears, the exact tension needed for the spring. The answer was so clear, so immediate that it was a physical ache. But the thought of creating it, of bringing even this small thing to life, felt like stepping off a cliff. Creation was a language he had once shared with Alara. To speak it alone felt like a monologue in an empty room. He looked at Maya's hopeful face. "Let's think about it," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "Maybe we can use some rubber bands and a little lever." It was a clumsy solution, a lie, but it was the only one he could offer. He saw the flicker of disappointment in her eyes before she hid it with a nod. He set the box down gently, the stillness of its cardboard ocean a perfect mirror of the quiet in his own heart. Chapter 2. The Glass Kingdom. 80 floors above the city, in a penthouse that was less a home than a statement of minimalist philosophy, Alistair Finch began his day. There were no pleasant smells here, only the sterile scent of purified air. His breakfast, a nutritionally optimized smoothie the color of slate, had been delivered by a silent servant who vanished before he entered the room. He stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, the city of Viridia spread below him like a circuit board. He was on a conference call, his voice a sharp, impatient weapon. "Uninspired is a generous term, Davies," he clipped, staring down at the ant-like traffic. "What you've shown me is a glorified appliance. It's efficient, it's functional, and it has absolutely no soul." On the other end of the line, the head of his R&D department stammered an excuse. Alistair cut him off. "I have an engineer, a senior one, asking for a week's leave for a family emergency." "What's the emergency?" "His wife is ill, sir. The deadline doesn't care about his problems," Alistair said, his voice flat and cold. "Tell him he has 2 days, or he can find a job that's more accommodating of his personal life." He ended the call without waiting for a response. The silence that filled the room was absolute. He ran a hand over his face, a gesture of profound weariness. His eyes drifted to a large, oil-painted portrait on the far wall. His father, severe and unsmiling, stared back at him from the canvas. A man who had built an empire and died in a hospital room with no one by his side. A flicker of something unease, self-disgust, tightened Alistair's jaw. He pushed it down, a familiar reflex. He turned back to the black granite table where a tablet lay. He touched the screen, and it lit up with a single elegant image. A fragment of a design, a gear curved with the organic grace of a nautilus shell. It was a piece of the legendary Aethel schematics, designs he'd spent a fortune acquiring in fragments from anonymous collectors. This single gear had more life, more vision, than anything his multi-billion-dollar company had produced in a decade.
"Find me Aethel," he whispered to the empty room, his voice a raw mix of command and plea. "I don't care what it costs."
Chapter 3. The Notice. The sub-basement of the Finch Automation's tower hummed with the steady rhythmic pulse of the building's life support. It was here, among the server racks and climate control units, that Leo Vance was most at ease. On Monday morning, he was recalibrating a cooling unit, his movements precise and economical. The unit had been malfunctioning for weeks, and the official engineers had recommended a full, costly replacement. Leo, with a quiet half-hour of observation, had found the problem. A tiny misalignment in a fan bearing, causing a harmonic vibration that threw the whole system off. "You're a magician, Vance." His direct supervisor, a harried mid-level manager named Kowalski, had said when he'd found the unit purring like a contented cat. "You just saved us $100,000. I swear, you listen to these machines better than the guys who designed them." Leo had just shrugged, a faint smile touching his lips. "They tell you what's wrong, if you know how to listen." Later, during his break, he sat at a public terminal, the plastic of the keyboard warm from a dozen other hands. He scrolled through his emails, deleting junk mail until he saw the subject line, "Important update regarding the PS-118 Makerspace program." He opened it. The words were couched in the sterile, apologetic language of bureaucracy, but their meaning was a punch to the gut. Due to a primary corporate benefactor pulling its funding, the school's beloved arts and engineering program, the one place Maya truly came alive, the one place she could build and dream, was being shut down, effective immediately. Leo's eyes scanned down the email until he found the name of the benefactor, his heart sinking with each letter. The funding had been pulled by the Finch Automation's Community Outreach Foundation. Chapter 4. An Informed Request. The anger that rose in Leo was a cold, unfamiliar fire. It burned away the fog of his grief, replacing it with a sharp, crystalline clarity. He thought of Maya's memory box, of her small, hopeful question. He thought of the gleam in her eye when she successfully wired a simple circuit or glued two pieces of wood together at a perfect right angle. That gleam was not a luxury. It was essential. He wouldn't storm the castle. He was a man who understood systems, and he knew that a frontal assault would fail. He found Kowalski in his small, cluttered office. "Mr. Kowalski," Leo began, his voice steady. "You said I saved the company some money this morning. I'd like to ask for a favor." Kowalski, surprised by the directness, leaned back in his chair. "What's on your mind, Vance?" "I need a 10-minute meeting with Mr. Finch." Kowalski laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Son, people with million-dollar budgets can't get 10 minutes with Mr. Finch. What could you possibly need to talk to him about?" Leo had prepared his words carefully. "I need to report direct observations of cascading design flaws in the Aethel schematic fragments. The flaws are only visible when you observe the physical stress on the machines they were intended for. It's a maintenance-level insight. An engineer would never see it." Kowalski stared at him, his mouth slightly agape. He didn't understand half the words Leo had said, but he understood the tone. It was the same quiet authority with which Leo had diagnosed the cooling unit. A maintenance man talking about legendary, multi-million-dollar designs was absurd. But Leo Vance was not an absurd man. The sheer, baffling specificity of the request was what made it so compelling. "I can't promise anything," Kowalski said, shaking his head in disbelief as he reached for his phone. "But this I have to see." An hour later, an email appeared in Leo's inbox. The subject line was a single stunning word: summoned. Chapter 5. The Consultant. The 81st floor was a world engineered to eliminate friction. The air was a constant neutral temperature. The light was a soft, shadowless glow. Even the sound was muted, absorbed by acoustic paneling that drank whispers and footsteps alike. It was in this unnervingly serene environment that Leo Vance stood before the CEO of Finch Automations. Alistair Finch did not ask him to sit. He stood behind his vast obsidian desk, a predator in his natural habitat, observing Leo with an unnerving stillness. "You have 10 minutes, Mr. Vance," Alistair said, his voice as polished and hard as the desk between them. "Impress me."
Leo didn't flinch. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to negotiate for his daughter's future. He spoke calmly, his voice the same steady timbre he used when explaining a complex repair. "You're trying to build Aethel's designs with a focus on speed and power," he began, gesturing vaguely towards the R&D wing. "But you're reading the schematics like a blueprint for an engine. They aren't. They're sheet music for an orchestra." He described the subtle warping he'd observed on the casings of server fans running at high RPMs, the microfractures on support struts in the building's core. "Your teams are executing the designs perfectly, but they're missing the philosophy. Aethel's work isn't about brute force, it's about harmony. Every component is designed to work in resonance with the others. When you push one part for maximum output, you create a dissonant frequency that slowly tears the whole system apart from the inside. You're building machines that are, by their very nature, destroying themselves." Alistair listened, his expression unreadable, but a muscle feathered in his jaw. The man standing before him in a simple worn work shirt was speaking with more insight than his entire team of six-figure engineers. It was infuriating and intriguing. "And you gleaned all this from fixing air conditioners?" Alistair asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You can learn a lot about a house by listening to its pipes," Leo replied evenly. Alistair circled the desk, his silence a palpable force. He stopped a few feet from Leo, studying him. This wasn't a simple maintenance man. This was an anomaly, a variable he couldn't account for. And Alistair Finch did not tolerate unaccounted for variables. He needed to control this one, to dissect it. "I'm creating a new position," Alistair announced, the decision forming as he spoke. "Special Technical Consultant. You'll be seconded to the R&D department. You will have access. You will observe and you will report directly to me. This is a temporary assignment. Your job is to show me this philosophy you speak of. Consider it a test." It was a leash, and they both knew it. A way for Alistair to keep this strange, insightful man under his thumb. For Leo, it was the only door that had opened. "I accept," he said. His new domain was a small, sterile white desk in a corner of the R&D lab, an afterthought in a room filled with gleaming workstations and holographic displays. The engineers watched him with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Leo ignored them. He carefully unpacked a small box. First, he placed Alara's worn, leather-bound sketchbook on the desk. Next to it, he laid his calipers, their steel cool and precise. And finally, he sat down. The Aethel automaton, the beautiful, broken bird, a silent testament to a world of creation Alistair Finch could not begin to comprehend. Chapter 6. Ghosts in the Machine. Days turned into a week, Leo observed. He watched as the R&D team unveiled their latest creation for Alistair, the Peregrine X, a luxury automated drone. It was a marvel of engineering, fast, silent, and lethally precise. It navigated a complex obstacle course flawlessly before landing on a platform with barely a whisper. The team looked at Alistair, beaming, hungry for praise. Alistair's expression was thunderous. He walked to the drone, picked it up, and felt its weight. His fingers traced its cold, aerodynamic shell. Then, without a word, he turned and hurled it against the far wall. It shattered with a sickening crunch of carbon fiber and electronics. "It's a flying brick!" he roared into the shocked silence. "It has no soul! Get it out of my sight!" He stormed out, leaving his team pale and trembling. Later that night, Leo saw him through the glass walls of the main conference room. Alistair was alone, the fractured Aethel schematics projected onto a massive screen. He stared at them with a look of desperate, almost painful longing. He had conquered the world of function, but the world of beauty remained a locked room, and he was pounding on the door. The next morning, Alistair strode through the lab, his mood still foul. His eyes landed on Leo's desk, on the small collection of personal items. He stopped, his gaze fixed on Alara's sketchbook. He picked it up. His touch was hesitant, almost reverent. He opened it to a random page. The drawing was of a mechanical wing, its structure a breathtaking combination of organic curves and geometric precision. It was unmistakably related to the schematics Alistair obsessed over, yet it possessed a life and fluidity that the technical drawings lacked. He saw notes in elegant, feminine script curling around the images, words like grace and flow and the curve of a falling leaf. He flipped through more pages, each one a window into the soul he'd been chasing. He looked up at Leo, a storm of questions in his eyes. "Who drew this?" he asked, his voice low and tight. Leo looked at the sketchbook, at the ghost of his wife's hand on the page. My wife," he said, and turned back to his work, leaving Alistair standing in a silence more profound than any he had ever manufactured. Chapter 7. The Unseen Flaw. The heart of the R&D lab was a machine the size of a small car, a high-precision automated lathe used for milling experimental components. And for 2 days, it had been malfunctioning. It produced microscopic imperfections, tiny errors that rendered every part it milled useless. The lead engineers, a pair of arrogant prodigies, poached from a rival company, were stumped. They had run every diagnostic, recalibrated every sensor. The machine insisted it was working perfectly, yet the results were flawed. Alistair, his patience worn to a razor's edge, stood over them, his presence radiating a dangerous pressure. "Forcefully fix it," he commanded. "Demanding, now." Leo, whose new role gave him clearance to be there, stood quietly by the doorway listening. He watched the machine's movements, not its digital readouts. He saw it not as a collection of parts, but as a body, and he could see it was in pain. As the engineers began another pointless diagnostic cycle, Leo spoke from the doorway, his voice calm and clear. Calmly, "It's the foundation," he said. The lead engineer shot him a contemptuous look. The foundation was laser-leveled, confident. "It's perfect." Correcting. "It was perfect," Leo corrected, explaining, "but the new server bank you installed in the sublevel below 2 weeks ago generates a low-frequency vibration. It's negligible for the building, but it's creating a harmonic dissonance in the lathe's mounting bolts. The machine is compensating, but the stress is causing a microscopic tremor at the end of each cutting cycle. You can't see it on the sensors because the machine thinks it's adjusting correctly." He pointed to a spot on the base of the massive machine. Emphatically, "Check the torque on the rear anchor bolts. I guarantee you'll find they're out of alignment by half a degree." The engineers scoffed, but Alistair's eyes narrowed. Commanding, "Check it," he ordered. Reluctantly, the engineer knelt with a digital torque wrench. He attached it to the bolt. A moment later, the wrench beeped. The engineer's face went pale. He looked at Alistair, then at Leo, his arrogance completely gone, replaced by disbelief. Alistair said nothing. He simply looked at Leo, his expression a complex mixture of shock, calculation, and a dawning, unsettling respect. The mystery of Leo Vance had just become significantly deeper. Chapter 8. The Science Fair. Finch Automations, in a reluctant nod to corporate responsibility, sponsored a handful of community outreach events each year. The annual PS 118 Science and Art Fair was one of them. Alistair Finch typically sent a low-level marketing executive, but this year, seeking a distraction, he decided to attend himself.
He walked through the crowded, noisy gymnasium with a detached boredom, shaking hands and manufacturing smiles for the cameras. He was about to leave when a small, unassuming project tucked away in a corner caught his eye. It was a shoebox painted blue. A sign next to it read, "The Memory Box by Vance." He moved closer. Inside the box was a diorama of a beach, and on the painted cardboard sea, tiny waves were moving. They rose and fell in a slow, gentle, and perfectly synchronized rhythm. He peered closer, his practiced eye for mechanics taking over. The mechanism was simple, almost primitive. A small, hand-cranked clockwork engine of gears and levers cut from wood and plastic. But it was elegant. It had a heartbeat. "You have to turn the handle slowly or the waves get too stormy." Alistair looked up. A small girl with her father's serious eyes was looking at him. Maya. "You built this?" Alistair asked, his voice softer than he'd intended. "My dad helped with the moving parts," she said proudly. "He's a maintenance man, but he's really a magician. He can make anything come alive." She pointed to the simple mechanism. "He says the best machines have a heartbeat." The simple, profound truth of the statement hit Alistair with the force of a physical blow. He looked from the earnest, honest face of the child to her beautiful, simple creation. He thought of his peregrine X-drone, a technical marvel that was utterly dead on the inside. He thought of his own life. This little girl and her father, with a shoebox and some scraps, had created more soul than his entire billion-dollar corporation. For the first time, Alistair Finch felt the true, staggering depth of his own poverty. A memory of the encounter would haunt him, a persistent, quiet ghost in his sterile, perfect world. Chapter 9. The Unveiling. The Finch Automations. Vision Presentation was the company's high mass, a cathedral of corporate self-congratulation. The air in the immense darkened auditorium thrummed with a mixture of anticipation and fear. Hundreds of journalists, investors, and industry rivals sat in tiered rows, their faces illuminated by the pale blue glow of the stage. On a massive screen behind the podium, the company's stock ticker climbed steadily, a testament to the market's faith in Alistair Finch's ruthless ability to deliver the future. Alistair stood at the center of the stage, a solitary figure bathed in a single, sharp spotlight. He was in his element, his voice resonating with a practiced, confident authority as he spoke of synergy, innovation, and a new paradigm in robotics. "For years, others have chased efficiency," resounding he declared, his voice echoing through the hall. "We have perfected it. Proud tonight, we unveil a machine that doesn't just perform tasks, it achieves them. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you," long pause, "the Argo." With a dramatic flourish, a section of the stage slid away, and the Argo rose from below on a hydraulic lift. It was a marvel of engineering, a humanoid robot with a polished chrome chassis and limbs that moved with an uncanny, silent grace. It was sleek, powerful, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was Alistair Finch, rendered in steel and circuitry. The crowd murmured in appreciation. The task designed to showcase its superiority was one of delicate precision, assembling a complex, multi-layered architectural model. The Argo's optical sensors glowed as it analyzed the scattered components. Its arm, a symphony of actuators and microservos, extended. It picked up the first piece with a surgeon's steadiness. For a moment, it was flawless. Leo watched from the back of the auditorium, standing in the shadows with the other low-level staff. He wasn't watching the spectacle. He was watching the machine's balance. He saw it before anyone else did. A minute, almost imperceptible tremor in the robot's torso as it reached for the second piece. The weight distribution was off. The gyroscopic compensators, programmed by simulations that couldn't account for the chaotic physics of the real world, were fighting a losing battle. On stage, the Argo's arm froze mid-motion. A low, grinding sound, horribly loud in the expectant silence, emanated from its shoulder joint. Its fingers twitched, then clamped down with crushing force, snapping the delicate model piece in two. The arm seized, vibrating violently for a second before the entire machine went rigid, its glowing sensors flickering and then dying with a pathetic pop. It stood there, a useless multi-million-dollar statue, a monument to failure. A collective gasp swept through the auditorium. On the massive screen, the green stock ticker stuttered, turned a blood red, and began to plummet. The whispers started instantly, a wave of venomous speculation from the investors, and barely concealed glee from the rivals. Under the harsh glare of the spotlight, Alistair Finch stood motionless, his face a mask of disbelief. The control he cherished above all else had evaporated. In a single, catastrophic moment, his perfect, sterile world had been publicly and humiliatingly shattered. Chapter 10. The Workshop. Hours later, the auditorium was a tomb. The audience was gone, the lights were dimmed, and the only sound was the faint hum of the emergency systems. Alistair sat on the edge of the stage, his impeccably tailored suit rumpled, his tie loosened. The broken Argo stood before him like an accuser. He was no longer a titan of industry. He was just a man sitting in the wreckage of his own ambition. A soft footstep echoed in the silence. Leo Vance emerged from the shadows, walking onto the stage with a quiet purpose that seemed alien in the vast, empty space. He stopped a few feet from Alistair, his gaze on the dead robot. "I can fix it," Leo said, his voice calm, without a trace of pity or triumph. Alistair looked up, his eyes hollow. "How?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "My entire team, the best engineers in the world, they built this. They said it was perfect." "They built the machine," Leo said simply, thoughtfully, "but they didn't understand its body. The center of gravity is too high. The simulations didn't account for the inertia of the arm's full extension. It's not a software flaw. It's a design flaw, a soul flaw." Alistair stared at him, the last vestiges of his arrogance falling away, replaced by a raw, desperate curiosity. He rose from the stage and wordlessly followed Leo, a complete reversal of their established dynamic. The deposed king following the ghost. Leo led him not to a gleaming control room, but down into the guts of the building, to the main R&D workshop. The sprawling room was deserted, the workstations dark. Leo walked over to a simple gray metal locker, his locker, and spun the combination lock. He pulled out two items. The first was a worn, leather tool roll that had seen decades of use. The second was a large, unassuming artist's portfolio, its corners softened with age. He walked to a wide steel workbench and laid the portfolio down. With a quiet reverence, he untied the simple ribbon holding it closed and opened it. The breath caught in Alistair's throat. Inside were not simple drawings but dozens of breathtakingly complex and beautiful blueprints. They depicted automata of impossible intricacy, kinetic sculptures that seemed to move on the page, gears and escapements designed with a celestial elegance. The artistic style was fluid, organic, and utterly unmistakable. It was the style he'd been hunting for years. In the bottom right corner of each page, a graceful, stylized signature was woven into the design's border. A conjoined A and E, Aethel. Alistair looked from the sublime genius on the page to the quiet, unassuming maintenance man standing before him. His mind reeled, unable to connect the two realities. This couldn't be. Leo seemed to understand. He reached into his locker and retrieved two more items. Alara's worn sketchbook and his own heavy, precise calipers. He placed the sketchbook next to the blueprints, its pages filled with the raw, artistic genesis of the designs. He then laid the steel calipers across both, a bridge connecting the world of art and the world of engineering. Sorrowfully. "You've been chasing a ghost, Mr. Finch," Leo said, his voice thick, with a sorrow that was 5 years old but still fresh. Softly. Aethel was never just one person. Tenderly, he tapped the sketchbook. She was the heart. Calmly, then he tapped the blueprints. I was the hands. With conviction, we were Aethel. As Alistair stared, his entire worldview collapsing in on itself, Leo reached for the final piece of evidence. He picked up the broken Aethelguard automaton from a shelf where he'd left it. His movements were sure and practiced, his fingers finding their way through the intricate metal feathers. He didn't use a tool. He simply pressed a specific point on the bird's chest, nudged a gear that was less than a millimeter out of place, and twisted a tiny hidden pin near its tail. There was a soft click, a whir of impossibly quiet machinery, and the bird came to life. Its head lifted, its silver filigree wings unfolded, and began to beat in a slow, steady, and perfectly graceful rhythm, a silent, mechanical heartbeat in the cavernous room. It was alive. And in the face of its simple, profound beauty, Alistair Finch finally understood everything he had lost, and everything he had never had. Chapter 11. The Confession in the Workshop. The whirring of the clockwork bird's wings was the only sound in the vast, silent workshop. Alistair Finch stared at it, this impossible little machine, and felt the foundations of his world turn to dust. The genius he had hunted, the ghost he had coveted, was not a tradable commodity or a corporate asset. It was a love story. He finally tore his eyes away from the bird and looked at Leo. The question that came out was not an accusation or a demand, but a raw, baffled plea. "Why?" he asked, his voice.
Why this? Why hide in a basement with a talent like this? You could have had anything. Leo gently stroked the bird's brass head, its wings still beating a steady, hopeful rhythm against his calloused finger. He was quiet for a long moment, not for dramatic effect, but because the answer was heavy, a thing he hadn't lifted in years. Every time I tried to finish something, Leo began, his gaze distant. It felt like I was writing the last sentence of the last chapter, like I was closing a book I wasn't ready to end. He looked around the workshop, at the cold, precise machinery that he understood so well. When we were Aethel, it was a conversation. She would sketch a line, the curve of a wing, and I would see the gears that could make it move. I'd build a mechanism, and she would find the poetry in its motion and design a form for it. We didn't need to talk, we just understood. The work was the conversation. He finally met Alistair's gaze, and for the first time, Alistair saw the profound, crushing weight of the grief Leo carried. When she was gone, the conversation stopped, Leo said, his voice thick. And the silence was deafening. I tried at first. I'd sit at the workbench with my tools, with her sketches, but the joy was gone. The soul was gone. Every piece I made, every gear I milled, it wasn't a creation anymore. It was a headstone, a monument to the fact that she wasn't there to see it. It was a constant, physical reminder of the half of me that was missing. He picked up his calipers from the workbench. It's hard to build anything when your best tool is broken. He fell silent, the confession leaving him looking exposed and hollowed out. He hadn't stopped designing because he'd lost his passion. He'd stopped because it was the only way to bear the pain of it. Chapter 12. The New Vision. The emergency board meeting was convened at dawn. The air in the 81st floor boardroom was thick with fear and recrimination. The board members, a collection of grim-faced men and women who measured the world in quarterly earnings, were ready for a sacrifice. They expected Alistair to offer up the head of his R&D department, to announce a restructuring, to do anything, to staunch the bleeding of the company's stock price. Alistair walked in, but he was not the same man who had left the auditorium in disgrace. The arrogant, brittle armor was gone, replaced by a quiet, unnerving resolve. He didn't offer excuses or scapegoats. He began by displaying an image of the shattered Argo on the main screen. "This," he said, his voice even, "is a monument to our own arrogance. It is a perfect machine with a fatal flaw. It has no soul. And that is because we, as a company, have been operating without one." He then replaced the image with a page from Ilara's sketchbook, the drawing of the wing, alive with grace and motion. "For years I have been searching for a legendary designer known as Aethel, believing this person held the key to our future. Regretful, I was wrong. Emphatic, Aethel was not one person. Declarative, Aethel was a partnership. A collaboration between an artist of sublime vision, Vance." He paused, letting her name hang in the air. "And an engineering genius who could bring that vision to life, her husband, Leo Vance."
A stunned silence filled the room. Alistair gestured, and Leo, dressed in his simple work clothes, stepped into the boardroom. The board members stared, their minds struggling to reconcile the man from the sub-basement with the mythical name Alistair had just uttered. Alistair didn't just show them the blueprints. He told the story. He spoke of the workshop, of the sketchbook, of the clockwork bird. He pitched a new vision for Finch Automations, one that abandoned the pursuit of sterile perfection for something far more radical, artisanal technology, machines with a philosophy, technology with a human soul. He wasn't just presenting a new product line. He was proposing a new corporate religion, with the work of Leo and Alara Vance as its sacred text. Passionate, our future, Alistair concluded, looking not at the board but at Leo, is not in making better machines. Determined, it's in making more meaningful ones. And for that, we need to do more than hire a genius. We need to honor a legacy. It was a massive gamble, a complete betrayal of the ruthless, profit-driven philosophy he had championed for a decade. It was the first truly honest thing he had done in years and seemed meaningfully the speaking any over of the work of Finch of Automation she now has provided. The Lion Baron. Chapter 13. The Silent Kitchen. The gambit worked. The story of Aethel, of the hidden genius and his lost love, was a narrative far more compelling than any marketing campaign. Leaked to the right journalists, it transformed a corporate disaster into a story of redemption and rediscovery. The market was intrigued. The stocks stabilized. The immediate crisis was averted. That evening, Alistair found Leo in the workshop, quietly packing his old leather tool roll. Panicked, "What are you doing?" Alistair asked, a note of panic in his voice. Calmly, "My job here is done," Leo said. It's being reinstated, permanently endowed. I'll buy them a new building if I have to," Alistair said quickly. He stepped forward. "But that's not the point. Leo, you can't leave. Name your price, any price, a salary, stock options, a percentage of the company, a penthouse on the 82nd floor right above mine. Anything you want, it's yours." Leo finished buckling his tool roll and looked at Alistair, his expression not unkind but resolute. "My only goal was to save the school program, Mr. Finch. I appreciate the offer, but that world? It isn't mine." He held out his hand. "Thank you." Alistair didn't take it. He watched, stunned into silence, as Leo picked up his things, gave a final parting glance to the Ethelgard automaton still sitting on the workbench, and walked out of the workshop, his footsteps echoing until they were gone. Defeated, Alistair went home. He entered his penthouse, and the silence that greeted him was no longer a symbol of peace and order. It was a crushing, suffocating void. The memory of the science fair, of Maya's proud explanation of her memory box, returned to him with an almost physical force. The best machines have a heartbeat. He thought of the quiet joy in Leo's apartment on that first Saturday morning, the smell of pancakes, the sound of shared laughter. An impulse, desperate and strange, seized him. He walked into his kitchen, a gleaming cathedral of Italian marble and German appliances that was rarely used for anything more complex than dispensing filtered water. He opened his pristine commercial-grade refrigerator and found, tucked away on a lower shelf, a box of high-end artisanal pancake mix he'd received in a corporate gift basket months ago. The scene was silent, save for the faint hum of the ventilation. His movements were awkward, clumsy. He, a man who could orchestrate multi-billion-dollar corporate takeovers, struggled with the simple instructions on the side of the box. He measured the powder with the precision of a chemist, but his hands felt alien, unsuited for the task. He spilled a dusting of white flour on the flawless black marble countertop and swiped at it, leaving a messy smear. He heated a professional-grade non-stick pan on the induction cooktop. He poured the batter. It spread into a single, perfectly round but utterly joyless circle. He cooked it, his posture stiff, his focus intense, as if he could will it into becoming something more than what it was. He slid the finished pancake onto a stark white plate and stood there in the vast, silent kitchen, staring at it. One perfect, solitary pancake, an emblem of his life. He had flawlessly executed a task and produced something with no meaning, no warmth, no soul. The full, staggering weight of his emotional poverty crashed down on him. His arrogance, the bedrock of his identity, was not shattered by a confrontation or a confession. It was annihilated in the silence of his own kitchen by the simple, tangible, and undeniable proof of his own emptiness. He had everything, and he had nothing at all. This was his epiphany. Chapter 14. The Aethel Innovation Lab. A week after his kitchen epiphany, Alistair Finch did not summon Leo Vance to his office. He went to him. He found Leo in the evenings at the newly reopened PS-118 makerspace, helping Maya and her classmates with their projects amidst the happy chaos of whirring drills and splattered paint. Alistair didn't arrive with a contract or a check. He came with a set of architectural blueprints under his arm. He unrolled them on a workbench littered with wood shavings and stray Lego bricks. Alistair began, his voice lacking its usual commanding edge. It was quieter, more deliberate. This isn't a gift. It's a proposal. The blueprints showed a disused wing of the Finch Automations Tower, a vast, forgotten space that had once housed a data storage facility. But the plans depicted something entirely new. One half of the space was a state-of-the-art research and development lab, filled with the sleek, high-tech equipment of Finch Automations. The other half was a sprawling community workshop with sturdy wooden benches, 3D printers, and open spaces for collaboration. A glass wall, meant to be more window than barrier, was the only thing separating the two. "I want to build this with you," Alistair said, looking at Leo directly. "We'll call it the Aethel Innovation Lab. Part cutting-edge R&D for the company, part community workshop. We'll establish a permanent, endowed partnership with Viridia's public schools. Your students," he gestured to the kids around them, "will have access to our resources. Our engineers will be reminded of why they started building things in the first place. It was not charity. It was a synthesis, a bridge between their two worlds, built not of pity or power, but of mutual need. It was a way for Alistair to learn how to build something with meaning, and a way for Leo to let his work and Alara's spirit live in the world again without it feeling like an ending." Leo looked at the plans, at the seamless integration of commerce and community, of soul and steel. He saw not a business proposition, but a path forward. "Okay, Alistair," Leo said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Let's build it." Chapter 15. The Workshop. The Saturday morning sun, bright and hopeful, streamed through the massive windows of the Aethel Innovation Lab 3 months later. The space was alive. It hummed with the quiet power of high-tech machinery and buzzed with the energetic, chaotic symphony of creation. On one side of the glass partition, Finch engineers worked on sleek new prototypes. On the other, the community workshop was a vibrant swirl of activity. Leo stood at the center of it, a cup of coffee steaming in his hand. He was in his element, moving easily between a group of teenagers coding a robot arm and Maya, who was patiently explaining the mechanics of her improved memory box to a younger child. The Aethel Guard automaton sat on his main workbench, not as a monument, but as a mascot, its wings beating a slow, steady rhythm. The main doors slid open, and Alistair Finch walked in. He was dressed not in a suit, but in simple jeans and a dark sweater. He wasn't there as a benefactor or a CEO. He was carrying a large, heavy box filled with raw copper wiring and assorted gears for the community stockpile. He set the box down and his eyes met Leo's across the bustling room. No words were needed. A quiet nod passed between them, an acknowledgement of their shared creation, this living, breathing space.
It was a look of comfortable, established partnership. A small boy, no older than 7, tugged on Alistair's sleeve, holding up 2 pieces of wood he was struggling to join together. Alistair, the man who once commanded boardrooms, looks momentarily lost. He knelt down, his movements still a little stiff, a little awkward, and looked at the boy's project. "Let's see," Alistair said, his voice soft. "I think we need to make a joint here." He picked up a piece of sandpaper and demonstrated, his large hands moving with a careful, newfound patience. A small, genuine smile touched his lips as the boy watched, fascinated. The story ended here, not with a grand declaration or a final triumph, but with this simple, resonant image. In a workshop filled with light and noise, 2 men from 2 different worlds stood together, one teaching, the other learning, both engaged in the quiet, ongoing, and deeply human act of building something new. It was a legacy that could never be bought, only earned, one Saturday morning at a time.
Thank you for taking a quiet moment with us. Every story is a journey, and we're so glad you joined us for this one.
We believe stories are a way to connect, even when we're apart. If you felt a connection to this tale, we invite you to subscribe and become part of our growing circle.
Our question for you today is, what's a simple moment of peace you've experienced this week?
Share it in the comments. Let's fill this space with serene moments.
Until the next story, be well.